All right, welcome in everybody to episode 15 of Taking the Field. I want to get to a couple Lions topics today, talk a little bit of football with you guys. And the first thing I want to get to is the Detroit Lions Football Power Index numbers for the 2020 season, according to the FPI and an article by ESPN. And according to the FPI, the Lions have the fifth easiest schedule in the NFL going into the 2020 season, and only the Colts, Titans, Bears, and Browns are ahead of them in terms of easiest schedules, in that order 1 through 4. But it's interesting because according to the FPI, even though they have the fifth easiest schedule going into 2020, the FPI only predicts the Lions to win between 6 or 7 games this season, and they only hold a 17% chance of making the playoffs in 2020. And on top of that, the Lions come in at number 28 overall in the power rankings, ahead of just the Jaguars, Redskins, Bengals, and Panthers behind them on that list. And for me, one of the questions that I thought when I looked at these numbers was, when you have one of the easiest schedules in the league and the playoff is expanding to a couple extra teams this year, the expanded playoff format for the NFL, could the Lions realistically kind of backdoor their way into the playoffs in 2020? I mean, let's say they win 8, 9, 10 games. With the expanded playoff format, could that be good enough to get them into one of the extra wild card spots? Because I think it could be. I think that we've seen in the past that several teams that won 8, 9 games during this regular season could have gotten in under the expanded playoff format. But the other thing that I wondered was, if the Lions really do only win 6 or 7 games again this year, especially if Stafford is able to play an entire 16-game regular season, do Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia get another year in 2021? Because if you think about, for Bob Quinn individually, this will be his, I believe, 5th year in Detroit, and for Patricia, it'll be his 3rd year in Detroit. And really, I think if they do only win 6 or 7 games this year, I don't think either of them comes back in 2021, especially Bob Quinn, because he's kind of the brains behind the operation, and he has been now for several years. And if 7 wins is the best that he can produce as the GM of this franchise, then no, I don't think he comes back in 2021. But then again, I'm not the one in charge over there at Ford Field, so that's just my opinion. I'm not saying that's going to happen. And then when you look at Patricia, let's say he does win 7 games this year. His record through 3 years in Detroit will be 16-31-1 overall through 3 years. That's about a 34% win percentage. Now, for reference, you go back to the previous coaching regime, and Jim Caldwell's record after 3 years in Detroit was 27-21. And he finished his 4-year tenure at Detroit, with a 36-28 record in 4 years. That was about a 56% win percentage over his 3 and 4 years here in Detroit. So really what you've done is, in 3 years, you've become 21% worse than you already were, essentially. So in 2021, if these things do play out, if they do only win 6 or 7 games, if they don't make the playoffs, if they're still in the bottom third of the NFL, then no, I don't believe either one of them comes back for the following year. But even with all that being said, Matt Stafford has some high expectations for this Lions offense in 2020. Now, Stafford, alongside many of his skill position players, which I'll mention in a minute, are now entering their second season of this Darrell Bevell offense. And like I said, the guys expect a big leap from year 1 to year 2 this year, assuming that guys like Stafford or Kerryon Johnson can stay healthy for most, if not all, of 2020. And Stafford gets back guys like Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, and Danny Amendola as his top 3 wide receivers, along with 2019 first-round pick TJ Hawkinson at tight end. And then at running back, hopefully Kerryon Johnson can finally put together an entire 16-game regular season for the first time in his career. But they also added, just in case, guys like DeAndre Swift and Jason Huntley in the 2020 draft back in April. But when you go back and look at 2019, when Stafford played that first half of the season, he ranked 2nd in touchdowns with 19, 4th in passing yards with 24.99, and 5th in passer rating with 106, while only playing the first few games of the season, that first half of 2019. So he was basically on pace for north of 35 touchdowns, 5,000 yards passing, and a passer rating of easily over 100 had he played the entire 2019 season. So I think that when you look at it, it's going to be the health of guys like Stafford or Kerryon Johnson being able to support the pass game with a solid running game. Guys like that, staying healthy on the offensive line. They invested 2 of their draft picks this year in offensive guards, in Stenberg and Jonah Jackson. And then obviously they have Frank Ragnow at center, and Taylor Decker's probably going to be your left tackle. They're not really sure what they're doing at right tackle yet, but at least on paper, if this offense can stay healthy, they probably could be a top 10, at worst top 15 offense in the league. I think the real issue is how improved the defense will be from a year ago, because you saw it even when they had guys like Jeff Driscoll or the quarterback out of Purdue, whose name I'm now forgetting, David Blau, there we go. Even when they had those guys in at quarterback after Stafford went down, they still were able to score 20 plus points in most of those games. The only problem was their defense was giving up 30 plus per game. So I think the real thing to watch here in 2020, whenever they do get around to playing, is how much better the defense is than it was a year ago. And if they actually do have some ability whatsoever to stop the opposing team's offense. Because if they do, I don't think it's that crazy to think that they could win 8, 9, even maybe 10 games this season. But if they don't, it'll probably be the end of Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia in Detroit. And I don't think that very many Lions fans will be too brokenhearted if it really does come to that. But that'll do it for episode 15 of Taking the Field. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this post, and also check out takingthefield.com for any past episodes of the podcast. And that'll do it for this one. Thanks for listening.